So like, why does India like me? Well, because I'm one of the like, let's be honest, I'm one of like the handful of white people who even knows what the hell's going on
Yes,
on their
yes.
side of the
Your
fence.
knowledge of this goes deep. Your historical knowledge goes deep. I mean, like that's why you've done so many podcasts and stories on this too. But could we maybe have like a little, like because it's our first time talking, we could obviously talk more. Could we get into a little broader conversation? I just want to also sort of know what you think of Justin Trudeau's role in all this. Like, is he?
He
What do
was
you
the,
what
he's
do
the
you
chief
make of that?
enabler. He's the chief enabler. So whereas Jagmeet is a ideological driver of particularly Khalistan, Justin Trudeau is a grand enabler of all extremism. And you heard, if you read the National Post article by Usul Dosanjh, who was in government with Trudeau before he became leader, and he's
Mm-hmm.
Sikh, and he was attacked by Khalistan. He's a real Canadian hero who tried to
Yes,
expose the India bombing as a Sikh, writing the
yes.
Khalistanis just beat the living hell out of him. Same with Barrage Deal. Like there's a problem we had in Canada where
Oh.
these Sikhs, these Khalistanis were going around instituting mob justice and on Canadians, and we just let them get away with it because they never went after any white Canadians.
Ujjwal Dosanjh is former health minister of Canada and also has been a former premier of British Columbia, which has a large Indian population. Ujjwal, always good to talk to you. The latest incident in Brampton and in Surrey, temples being targeted, Hindu devotees being targeted. Does this mark a new low within the diaspora in particular, which could rapidly spiral out of control, especially if it becomes, as it appears, Hindus versus Sikhs?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's the intention of the Khalistanis. That's always been the intention of the Khalistanis. They've used 1984, the unfortunate events of 1984, to create a permanent wedge between the communities, and they have so far failed. This obviously was done, what they did with the Hindu temple in Surrey and in Brampton was done because of the consular officials, but also it has the other motive as well, to create that wedge between the Sikhs and Hindus, where there hasn't been such a wedge in India or in Canada. 1984 was a horrible event, obviously, but you won't find a Hindu or a Sikh that says that was a good thing.
But the fact is that these Khalistani extremists seem to be getting away time and again with it. There is a sense of growing impunity, Ujjwal Dosanjh. To what extent is the Canadian government and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in particular responsible for this? That over the years, he just hasn't sent a tough enough message to these extremist forces.
Well, Canadian politicians, the political class generally, have been suffering from political amnesia on this issue for a long time. Mr. Trudeau, in particular, ever since he's taken over, the Khalistani movement in Canada has actually reached fairly high up in terms of the number of people it has attracted.
Who's like actually a
Yeah. I will say this is quite an unusual beat for a white Canadian guy, because this might not even be it's not clickbaity, right? A lot of times, right? Because sometimes people don't care, but it is so important. But the other thing is also only recently had I ever heard of NSICOP. Like that's just something we don't even talk about. It was not even a term I heard in the news before. Like, and I say this as a yeah. So anyway, so it's like it's a special committee, National Intelligence Committee of Parliamentary, blah blah blah, whatever it is, and they keep talking in the news about foreign interference, but they don't define what that is and what that means. But for now, watching some of these other posts and sort of digging in a little bit for me, I'm learning a little bit about what that means. I mean, you've covered a lot of ground here today, explaining a lot of the background about the Khalistani thing, but also look at me here in our province in BC with David Eby and this Dingo thing and the CCS 100. Like, what does that mean when you're tight with somebody who's like your advisor, who's also a journalist, but he's very connected to the Chinese community? Like, what our politicians, for the most part, I think, suck up to these people purely for votes or for some sort of other gain, or
often, like, if you're clever, like, again, there's ways to like infiltrate legal, like, again, another reason why I'm like skeptical on the Indian foreign interference. Again, I'm quite popular among Indo-Canadians who are not crazy, because there's a bunch of them saying kill them, and I'm saying don't kill them, which is the popular position among the prospective to be killed community. there aren't, I can tell you, like, who've seen the insides of these institutions. There aren't really institutions to infiltrate and take over. And it's like your major Hindu organization is like an organization that nationally has like 3 volunteers, working for it. Okay. So that's not the institutions that the Chinese community had. And again, this isn't Chinese, and like part of it, it's tragic because this is why you need good governance. Like the Chinese have been here for hundreds of years, and there's a Chinese head tax, and they built the railroad, and a lot of Chinese people have nothing to do with the CCP, and have had institutions, and they've come here and they've integrated and they've been successful, and like they have their kids become doctors and lawyers, and they create all good functioning things where they've been able to create Chinese institutions and have this for their own community and within Canada. All first world, part of the bargain of societies coming together and what powers the West. No problem with that. However, these institutions become vulnerable to hostile foreign powers if we let them. So while I have no problem with any of the Chinese people who came here 200 years ago to build the railroad or have no connection to the CCP, I do have a problem with the CCP because the CCP has a problem with me because it's still bitter about the opium wars and blah, 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 like who's making all the fentanyl, right? And who's pushing this, and they want global hegemonic dominance and this, and part of the ways of getting influence is they speak China and they have influence where they can push into. So there was a push by the CCP to get into Chinese language media stations and Chinese cultural centers and actively infiltrate them here in Canada, push out the people who aren't CCP aligned and take over the institutions. So when these people are doing the bad behavior, this is like the foreign interference, when they start getting into bed with politicians, this is where problems come, because politicians get in bed and you have this, okay, what if this guy is a CCP asset and he's a journalist, activist, whatever, right? Same way people can make, although I'm purely Canadian, I have nothing to hide. Like you could say, oh, Daniel has connections with these different organizations, activists, blah, 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 he's a journalist. Yeah, I'm a journalist, I have a platform, I get to talk to a lot of people that you don't get to talk to, and that gives me the ability to talk to this person. So like I can, as a Canadian citizen, I can accrue more influence. And there's ways you can do it. You can run a successful business, you can gain a following, you could blah, 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 blah. But the problem is, like, if you go into certain organizations that are totally co-opted by one entity like the CCP, right? Then you can go, okay, we can dance around and I can take you to a community center where the community can show up. And then you can go to take them to another, like cultural event, and then here's a journalism, and then have all these different organizations that look like they're separate and different, but they're all kind of working together, they're all under the CCP branch. You can create an illusion to the politician that, hey, we have the community, we are the community leaders. Like once you take this over, and if you can get enough people, because you control the entire thing, then it's like, okay, you get into it. And even politicians who might be aware of this and try and keep it, like, you can't just like say, I'm not going to Chinese New Year celebrations because one of the guys has business interests in Beijing. We get all that. But what we're learning right now is actually there needs to be some sort of line here. Like we have to be honest and say certain, like, and it's not the people, like the Iranian people are perfectly fine with this. Like, yeah, screw the government back home. Like, and anyone who supports it as a terrorist, go for it. Yes. Like, take measures against the regime. I'll jump. And a lot of Iranians, when Trump imposed sanctions and things, they were happy to say, okay, we're jumping through more hoops. I'll pass the security thing because I just don't want IRGC members. Like, they're an actual problem. Like, yeah, I'm not the regime. I understand I'm from Iran, and that comes with an extra bit of thing. Same thing should be for the Russians. But there should be a reason why, again, let's be honest. Someone who's like born and raised 3 generations Australian coming to immigrate to Canada and Australian societies and like an Australian institution is a lot safer, and we should put a lot less mental scrutiny onto it than we should to something from Russia or China, right? And there's a gradient, right? And you say, okay, where's the Venezuelan government on us right now? Okay, they're hostile, right? But Costa Rica is kind of neutral, but it's a different language. So like somewhere between Australia and Venezuela is Costa Rica, right? But like, again, these are like real world conversations that we need to be having. But again, I'm not the first commentator to say that our ability to discuss issues of culture and race over the 20th century has not been
good, because people are petrified to just say the things. But I think that's changing. Now we're saying the things that people didn't say out loud.
People saying the things. NFL players are hitting the Trump dance.
Yeah. We're saying
India,
the conversation is happening about a lot of things, about immigration, about abortion. Gosh, you could never say a peep about abortion before. Now people are talking about it, and talking about how they really feel about it, but had to keep it inside
yeah.
for so long, right? My final question to you is about our politicians, particularly Justin and Jagmeet. Are they just stupid, or are they really criminally driven? I mean, they are doing nefarious things, but do they know what's their motivation? Is it just votes or to stay in power? Or is there something else driving these sort of ludicrous decisions that they must know? If you know what's going on, and now I know, they know. What is your opinion of their motivations in general with foreign interference?
So what I heard from Jagmeet is I've heard from people who knew him from before he became leader that he was a smooth operator and a man of some intelligence, and the guy you see on TikTok is less indicative of that. I listen. I think Jagmeet Singh is an ideologically motivated Khalistani. This has always been the record. There's a video of him denying the Air India bombing, kind of, and not able to say putting up pictures of Tawinder Parmar and Osama bin Laden is a bad thing. So I do think he's legitimately driven by the ideological Khalistanism, which has gotten into this woke critical race. So I do actually think Jagmeet's like an actual critical race theory Khalistani ideologue. And Justin, I've always maintained, is like the most dangerous type of man. I do think, like, listen, I think IQ is reasonably valid as an intelligence test. And if we're going to talk about it, listen, it's fun to make fun of Trudeau for being stupid, and I do it too. Like, at some points, like, he's functionally impaired. And he claims to be. But I do actually think he's in the most dangerous fields. Like, I do think his IQ is around like 104 to 107. Like, if I had to bet 105, which is the most dangerous part, because he's been educated, he has a name, and he's smart enough to engage with people that he's smarter than. Like, he can go into rural Windsor and meet some less sophisticateds, and yes. But has that sort of, but I think this gives him the capacity, one, to overjudge his capabilities and under deliver on them. Because I don't think he's a genius, and I don't think there's a sophisticated political operator behind this, but I do think there is a man of, slightly above average intelligence who grew up in Trudeau. Listen, Canadian royalty. Again, his wedding cabinet was running the country. For the most part, he doesn't seem too interested in governing and this and that. He's like a playboy, but he's smart enough to know that he's smarter than average, and kind of, I think this eggs him on to deserve. Because I do think if he was like, listen, if he was on the other side of the IQ spectrum, like below 100 in the mid 90s, he'd be a much better prime minister. He wouldn't be able to as competently do the things he's doing. He'd still try and drive the country into the ground, but he'd be swerving a bit more instead of a little bit, more tight focus straight at the wall or off the cliff or wherever he's going. So again, I think Justin Trudeau is a slightly intelligent fop. An amalgamation of everything that's wrong with what you could say of like upper middle class, elitist, urban, isolationist, holier than thou. I know the things. I went to school. I have the degree. I have the empathy. I have the good ideas. Right? Critical race theory. He can understand it. Right? I understand it. The oppressed thing, and he's not smart enough to see absolutely through it. But he's at the intelligence level where he can get that. Right? Critical race theory isn't hard. And he's smart. He can get it. Oh, oppress. You can teach this to someone in a day. So, okay, he's not brilliant. He learns critical race theory in 2.5 days. That's how smart he is. Okay, he's learned an entire ideology in a.
You just said earlier he's driving the country into the ground, and he's sort of smart enough to hold the reins on it, as you're describing. But why is he doing this? Does he want to go down as the worst prime minister in history? Does he want to like ruin the economy? Does he want to get rid of the middle class? Because he's sure as hell doing a good job.
I think he sees I think he's sold himself on the greater good, right? The utopian of like, I'm fighting climate change. There are backwards people in the country with backwards ideals, and I am taking them into the future. And when people write the history of this, they will say Justin Trudeau, who was friends of the Muslims, friends of the Sikhs, presided over an area of prosperity and integration, and he really created the multicultural engine. Like, I think part of this is, and like, he doesn't know, but because, and then under Trudeau, 50% of the pilots were women and half of them were women of color. And this is what led us to something, but at the end of the day, like, countries are about resources and national security and, maintenance of cultural stability and all the things that they have been about for the last 10,000 years. No, Steve Jobs didn't invent the iPhone. That didn't change human civilization to its very fundamental core. Like, you still need to run a functioning civilization, even if you have TikTok. And I think, that. So, listen, I think he's actually sold on his own sort of dream, and some of it's coming to reality. He's got to say, okay, less immigrants, we're taking him down, and they're in crisis management here. But I think he probably will. Listen, I've always thought his hero is Greta Thunberg.